Bueno, yo me llamo Corrado SCUDELLARO y junto a mi compañera Giulia Formato estamos presentando esa contribución sobre la crisis energética del Ecuador en 2024. Y los dos somos estudiantes de doctorado del Politécnico de Turín, en Italia. Pero desde ahora voy a hablar en inglés por nuestra presentación. Um, So, we'll be presenting the study on the evolving perception of the hydroelectric heritage of Latin America, especially with the experiences of Ecuador. As Professor Michel Alvarez already said, industrial heritage gained an important recognition, and within this context, especially hydroelectric heritage plays a crucial role, especially in Latin America or in Ecuador, where hydropower remained the main energy source, around 70% of the whole energy production. And we decided to investigate this case because the 2024 energy crisis, which affected Ecuador since June up to December, more or less, exposed the system vulnerability and prompted a reconsideration of hydroelectric infrastructure, not only as a technical productive asset, but also a strategic, cultural, and environmental resource.
As Corrado said, in Ecuador, hydroelectricity production accounts for nearly 70% of the energy generation of the country. So the country has a long history of hydroelectric energy production. The first plant was inaugurated in 1899 in Loja, and it was one of the earliest hydroelectric plants in Latin America. Unlike in other parts of the world, hydropower in Ecuador began in a small town rather than in a large industrial hub. Until the mid-20th century, hydropower development in Ecuador was fragmented. There were small regional plants that served isolated urban centers. But a major turning point came in 1961 with the creation of INECEL, which centralized national electrification planning. During the 70s and the 80s, so the years of the oil boom, Ecuador invested instead in large hydroelectric projects to diversify its energy production. And while urban population welcomed these changes, rural and indigenous communities faced expropriation, displacement, and full force of the ecological damage produced by these big projects. In fact, in 2008, in response to this, as a response to these big infrastructures, Ecuador's constitution introduced the rights of nature, so giving ecosystems legal standing. Since then, some court rulings, for example, the 2022 Piatua River case, have blocked certain hydropower projects, reflecting a sort of a shift in public values. So the operation that has been continued from then of these infrastructures doesn't shield them from vulnerabilities. A major energy crisis in late 2024 revealed both structural and environmental weaknesses of these plants, so highlighting the fragile connection between the communities and the hydroelectric heritage of the nation.
So, yeah, as my colleague already pointed out, the crisis was between July and September, and it started as a series of historical drought that affected the country, but all the Andean part of South America. For example, in April, Colombia already halted energy exports in Ecuador due to shortages, and it triggered kind of a domino effect, which led to Ecuador declaring a state of climatic emergency. For example, key reservoir, we see here the hydroelectric plant of Mazar, dropped to critical level, and hydroelectric plant basically stopped functioning. This also was worsened by the actual situation of Ecuador. We can see that massive blackouts of up to 14 hours affected the country, especially since October, November 2024. And the lack of alternative infrastructure and poor maintenance worsened the situation, with diesel generator becoming widespread and polluting and deteriorating air quality. Altogether, with the already difficult situation which the country was living into, which was the security crisis that started in 2023 due to growing violence and organized crime. So this contingency, this conjunction between the energy crisis, the security crisis, and the discourse of hydroelectric heritage highlighted the Ecuador energy system sensitivity to external shocks. And triggered us to try and investigate this phenomenon. So, as we said, hydrocarbon in Ecuador is the main energy source and a key shaper of landscape and territories. However, the local communities are rarely included in the planning and recognition of hydroelectric heritage. So it becomes crucial to understand how, and actually if, the hydroelectric infrastructure are evaluated by the local communities and the local institution, and to understand if the energy crisis affected the perception and attribution of value to this particular kind of heritage. So to do that, we try to use a sort of sociological methodology. Of course, we started with literature review on hydroelectric heritage and the energy crisis, but we also developed online questionnaire, which we received almost 70 replies, so kind of a nice asset, and followed up by some semi-structured interview with some experts to deepen the analysis.
In this graph, you can see the distribution of the respondents to the questionnaire. We had an equal gender distribution with a varied age range. All participants had at least university degree. So an observation that can be made is that a more balanced distribution in terms of educational background would have allowed for a more representative understanding of this perception that we were trying to grasp. The first topic addressed through the questionnaire was the perceived advantages and disadvantages of hydroelectric production in Ecuador. As you can see, majority of more than 50% of respondents expressed a generally favorable view of hydropower in general as an energy source for Ecuador. Among them, nearly 30% emphasized the multiple benefits for environmental and economic sustainability of hydroelectric as an energy source and its contribution to territorial development and as well and its potential as a good alternative to fossil fuel. Other positive aspects of hydroelectric production in Ecuador included its affordability, the easy access to the resource, and its historical role in national development. However, the same availability of water as an energy source emerged as a critical concern, especially in light of the 2024 energy crisis. Particularly the expert we interviewed highlighted a contrasting opinion on this very topic. So while urban populations view hydropower more favorably for its role in water management and particularly flood control, rural communities experience the whole of the negative impacts without proportional benefits. Key disadvantages identified in hydropower as an energy source included the overdependence on water resource and the bad infrastructure planning and maintenance, along with insufficient community participation in the decision-making progress that raised tensions in this national context.
So after we analyzed the pros and cons of hydroelectric heritage according to the local perception, we wanted to go to the actual contingencies, so the impact that the energy crisis had on the life and on the perception of hydroelectric as part of the national heritage. So the impact was investigated in the working life, the family life, and the free time, let's say, the leisure time. And we realized pretty soon that there were different approaches to that, which was also confirmed by one of the interviewees. While the electricity outages deeply affected urban areas, which were more reliant on energy and electricity, many indigenous and rural communities were way less affected. This is also a very interesting point because it's kind of the opposite of the impact that the hydroelectric infrastructure has. hydroelectric infrastructure basically doesn't have a strong impact on urban population because it does not affect their own territories, but it has a very strong impact on rural and indigenous communities because it's their territories which are affected and modified by by this infrastructure. So the crisis did not only affect the life and the economy of the country, it also affected how hydropower as an infrastructure is perceived. And after the crisis, several participants noted that there was a widespread lack of confidence in the resource due to the inefficacy and inefficiency of the infrastructure and a lack of maintenance and interest on it. Also, the interviewees confirmed that the series of crises which started from the 90s, so this crisis was not the first one, it's actually the last one in a series that started in the 90s. The series of crises, a lack of maintenance and inadequate management, together with a general lack of interest by the public powers and by the local communities towards hydroelectric infrastructure, meant that the perception of them as part of the heritage or also just as a valuable infrastructure and energy resource kept worsening. For example, nearly 45% of respondents indicate that perception of hydroelectric infrastructures changed significantly after the crisis. And the energy crisis actually acted as a polarizing event, reinforcing or reversing prior views. So those who already thought that hydroelectric was not a reliable source just exacerbated their views, and vice versa. So one of the first results that we understood from this campaign of interviews was that we cannot assume that hydroelectric infrastructure in Ecuador already is recognized as part of the heritage. In reality, we understood that rural population tend to view the nature itself as their heritage, while urban population associate energy infrastructure to a technical component, and they tend to value more the landscape it creates. And so one of the major obstacles to recognize hydroelectric infrastructure as heritage is actually the often conflictual nature of its development. Most of this infrastructure, yes, shaped the country, but also they were imposed without a consultation with the local communities, which often leads to rejection of new projects. And in general, there is a limited perception of hydropower as heritage. This means that in our perspective, it is important to find what needs to be addressed to guarantee the conservation of this heritage, these landscapes, and the right management of a living heritage.
So these are just the first results of our research that we think it's worth furthering. From this point of view, from the point of view of furthering this research on the topic, there are some methodological limitations that are worth noting. First of all, both the questionnaire and the interviews addressed a topic that it was highly political, and it was a particularly sensitive topic, also given the context in which fieldwork was conducted. There was the it was the presidential election that were hosted from March, April of this year. For this same reason, we weren't able to reach representatives from administration or private sector to interview. So future research on this topic in this context would benefit from a more diverse sample of interviews, including these representatives from public administration and private sector. Additionally, the questionnaire did not include a question on the respondents' geographical origin, and this was an important omission since the energy crisis impacted regions unequally, and as the interviews revealed, urban and rural perception differ significantly. So, in conclusion, this study highlights the urgent need to reframe hydroelectric systems in Ecuador, not only as productive assets, but also as cultural and social landscapes. The 2024 crisis revealed the risks of the dependence and lack of planning and management, but also highlighted a dialogue on energy justice, sustainability, and community inclusion. So to really valorize hydroelectric heritage, we found out that participatory design and community involvement, even in the early planning stages of the realization of these infrastructures, are essential components. Only then these infrastructures can really be integrated into the cultural memory and not be viewed as only imposed objects, but as a shared achievement. As one of the interviews noted, part of the industrial and particularly hydroelectric heritage is the injustice attached to it. So recognizing this truth is the first step toward designing infrastructure and management and valorization practices that are not only functional, but also just and ultimately heritage worthy, to be recognized to processes of heritage making. So this is all the more important in the face of climate change and energy transition. So the theme of energy justice, that means clean and fair price energy for all, is possible. But we have to rethink how we design, govern, and value these systems. Thank you very much for the attention and for allowing me to participate in the debate, even if I'm far away.
Muchas gracias a todos.